Okay, I'd just like to say at the beginning thank you to the organisers of this conference for giving me an opportunity to speak today and to learn from such an interesting group of people. I was asked to talk about urban food strategies and strategic approaches within cities that are currently relatively prevalent in the UK, at least, and in other countries around the world, and their role in driving sustainable local agri-food systems. I'll just go through, I just want to say at the beginning that I'm not necessarily, I'm the project manager of a Food Smart City project that looks at the role of urban food, and I'll go on and talk about that in a bit more detail in a second. But I'm not necessarily an advocate of the urban approach to understanding food systems, and I'll end by posing some perhaps critical questions, as in criticism, not that the questions are really good, about urban food. So I'm just going to, so the presentation today, I'll just talk about some of the opportunities that have arisen in recent years and the responses that we can see within cities and other urban areas, and then, as I said, question their effectiveness. And I should say that I'm based at Harper University, which is an agriculture and land-based university in Shropshire, but I work for Universities West Midlands, who are an umbrella organisation that supports 12 universities based in the West Midlands region of England. And my role, the project that I'm involved in, and we have a couple of members who are also from our constituent universities in the room, just briefly outline the Food Smart City project. The project was set up to stimulate, essentially to stimulate collaboration between universities within the West Midlands region in order to develop the concept of a food smart city and work towards the 5 points you can hopefully see on this sheet. So essentially our aim has been, through looking at collaboration in terms of research, education, and also engagement activities specifically focused at the region, in order to try and contribute more effectively to regional food security and sustainability strategies, for example, support economic development, link better with industry and commerce, and also, as I said, develop educational activities. So that's the context within which we are working. In terms of what is a food smart city, this is a guiding definition that we've used to help us sort of concentrate the mind, and as I said, part of the project is really to understand what is a food smart city. But you can see, or I'll read rather, the definition we're adopting, which is a city or metropolitan area that harnesses its potential to maximise the social, economic and environmental benefits of the food system as a whole, whilst also supporting its rural hinterland and contributing to global food security and sustainability objectives. So you can see it's about cities and urban areas looking after themselves, but also it includes the relationship between urban and rural areas, which is obviously a theme of our work today, and also the idea of that we all have a responsibility in a global sense within the food sector, and in current times. In terms of what a food smart city looks like, that's part of the process we're going through. I think you can characterise 2 areas of debate and ideas in this area in terms of food smart, sustainable food cities. These kinds of ideas. On the left we have a people-centred, community-centred approach, which is very much about bringing people together and educating, and very much a grassroots perspective. And then at the other end of the scale we have technical, industrial solutions to the issues of feeding our cities more effectively. And obviously I'm characterising it here, but one is technology focused, the other one is human focused. And one of the things we're trying to do through this project is really look how we can bring these 2 perspectives together and the opportunities around them, because there's obviously at the grassroots level there's an awful lot of interest and potential in the UK and in other countries at the moment that can be harnessed, and also there are emerging ideas and technology and resources at the more technological end of things. So I'll briefly go through why cities are so important, and why the issue of urban food has risen up the agenda in recent years. And again, this is something you will have covered already. I think it can more or less be mostly summed up in this graph here, which plots actual and predicted global population over the past, well, since the 60s and then to 2050. And it's this key relationship here between the brownish line, which is the urban population, and the greenish line, which is the rural population. And we can see somewhere between around 2007, 2008, as many of you will be aware, that the urban population surpassed the rural population for the first time in recorded history. But if you think about it, this is actually a fairly arbitrary fact. You know, if there's 51% in cities, 49% in rural areas, does it really matter much? And I think perhaps the more, but it resonates with people, and it resonates with policymakers and people who are advocates and people interested in this field. But I think the more important point was actually around the 1980s, where the rate of urbanisation started to exceed the rate of rural growth, and this is something that we're predicted to grow in the future. And obviously, this graph just cuts down a lot of data. There are a lot of other issues why we become interested in it. The visual aspects of poverty in the city and the social problems associated with it. And urbanisation is not an inherently bad thing. Obviously, we can potentially all live in cities very happily. But when you combine the growth in urbanisation with the situation that this graph represents, which is the rise in food costs, this is from the FAO, and according to a consumer price index, we can see the world food prices have risen sharply. Well, have been rising for a long time, but have risen sharply since around 2006, 2007, and that obviously led to a lot of policy interest in this area. Food price, and again I'm simplifying things to a certain extent, but food price acts as a proxy, I think, for the underlying stresses on the food system, the growing difficulties in supplying food, and then growing food and then distributing it to those in need. So the food price index illustrates the environmental sustainability crisis that is happening now and has been happening for a while. But also, obviously, it has implications on affordability of food for poor people, which, of which we have many in our cities. And in the future, it's almost undoubtedly going to happen is that we're going to have more and more people living in cities, purchasing food that is more and more expensive, and this is probably why we're all here in the room. But of course, food is expensive in rural areas as well. This is not an urban problem in that respect, and I think there's a danger, particularly within the urban food literature and interest, which I've been had a lot of dealings with through this current project. I think there's a danger of talking about urban food and urban food issues when actually we mean food and food issues, and that one of the tasks for people studying this area is really to delineate between those issues that are specific to urban areas and those issues that that affect the whole system. Nonetheless, urban food environments provide specific problems and also specific opportunities that I think are hard to deny. And these are quite evident, I guess. There's a concentration of food consumption and the effects of that. In other words, the logistics of producing and removing foods in cities, and this highlights that physical space, which is very important, and that's something that geographers will no doubt agree with. There's also a concentration of people that fosters dynamic social movements that perhaps are more liable to occur within cities, alternative views, and the cross-fertilisation of ideas and multiculturalism and tribalisms coming together. So I think it's a source of ideas to help us tackle these problems. And also particularly in recent years in the UK, and I think it's a fairly longer term or medium term trend, is we see more and more powers being derived to city levels in the UK, and therefore the power at the political level to make change, which perhaps wasn't there before so much.